Welcome to Ageless by Rescu. This podcast is devoted to exploring the science of rejuvenation, uncovering the most trusted experts, the must-have products, innovations, and technology in the field of vitality, aesthetics, new beauty, and cosmetic enhancement. Scott, I am so absolutely delighted to have you on the show. This is a conversation that I've been waiting to have with an expert for so long. Thank you for coming on Ageless by Rescu.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I think we should start with a few definitions and just setting the stage of what exactly we're speaking about. So we're talking about psychedelics in a therapeutic format. So It would be great for you to kind of set the scene of what we're talking about and what therapeutic drugs we're talking about.
Yep. So in the Australian context, at least at the moment, we're talking about the use of psilocybin as a treatment for treatment-resistant depression and MDMA as a treatment for PTSD. Those are the two substances and indications that have been made legal since July.
You know what I got confused is I thought it was an either or administration. So I thought you could use psilocybin and for, lack of a better word, many people would know that as magic mushrooms or mushrooms.
Yep.
So I thought you could use, and MDMA is also known as ecstasy. We're talking about therapeutic grades. And what I thought, obviously incorrectly, is that either drug could be administered for persistent depression, treatment-resistant depression, or PTSD. But you're saying it's the MDMA. MDMA gets used differently to psilocybin.
That's right. Yeah.
All righty. And tell us about the change in Australian laws, because I've been following this really, really carefully. I attended a conference, a presentation about it before it became legalized. And as I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, it got knocked back and then very surprisingly got pushed through as legislation.
Yes, that's true. I believe there are a number of submissions before it got through. So both the substances for those specific indications have been taken from Schedule 9, which is basically the Australian poisons schedule, into Schedule 8, which is more of a highly controlled medicine schedule, but only to be treated for those specific conditions. And you have to
Can I ask you, how did you become, you're a psychotherapist and you've been working, you're also a musician, and
Yep.
I love that these two worlds are going to intersect in the conversation we're going to have. But how did you become interested in psychedelic assisted therapy?
Well, I think through my training, it became apparent to me that a lot of the treatments that we have for mental health at the moment, although they're useful, they often come up short in terms of how effective they are for people. And there's always sections of the population where most of what we have just doesn't work at all. So there was a real need for new and novel treatments, particularly for these conditions that can be so debilitating for people. And so that was kind of an initial thing. And then as I did my Hakomi training, which is a mindfulness-based body psychotherapy that I'm trained in, one of my trainers was talking about some of the research that was happening in the US, and it sounded really exciting. And it sounded like the Hakomi method was a really good fit for this particular way of working. So that got me more interested. And then I watched a couple of documentaries about some of the research that's happening in Israel and in the US and in the UK, and got more and more interested. And then I also found out that there's music played basically all day on dosing day, and that's a huge part of the experience. And with my background as a performing musician, it just, as you say, those two worlds really do intersect for me.
And I wanted to kind of go back to what you were saying about psychotherapy and the treatment resistance that is acknowledged by the professionals in the area. And as a layperson, I often speak to people who are on various medications or years and years and years of therapy. And there's the frustration that the breakthrough is so late to happen. And with the cost of ongoing therapy, with the shortage of therapists available, I mean, we know that post-pandemic, there was a crisis point for access to adequate and correct mental health resources.
Yeah.
So I can see the interest for a government and a professional body to really get together and say, okay, we are now at a crisis point here. We have a massive need for something that's going to be either adjacent to, instead of, or together with the traditional therapies. Otherwise, we're just not going to be able to help enough people.
Yeah, I mean, it's a reasonably labor intensive therapy. So it's two therapists for every client. But I think the real key thing for me is it seems to be helping people who haven't been helped otherwise. Some people will try antidepressants, works great for them, they feel better, that's all good. Some people go to therapy, they find it really helpful, and that's all good too. But there's these sections of the population where it's not helpful, or as you say, it takes years and years, or there's side effects associated with the drugs that they're on. So having this new option, hopefully, will be able to bring help to people who really need it.
Look, you're going to get a lot of pushback from ultra-conservative people, also anyone who's kind of grown up in a generation of the war against drugs. And now we're saying we've got medical professionals, psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists advocating for the use of what was previously considered illegal drugs in therapies. And it'd be great for you to just explain the difference or just tell us more about what psilocybin is and what MDMA is in the context of medicinal use.
Yep. I think there's an interesting point there. I was listening to a podcast with a couple of researchers in the US a couple of weeks ago, and they were talking about that they were currently putting together a ballot for like a citizen ballot in California. I don't know the full details of it, but they were saying that a lot of the people who are supporting them are actually from conservative camps, particularly veterans, because a lot of veterans come back and have a lot to deal with when they get back home, PTSD and reintegrating into the community. So there is actually broad support for this across the political spectrum, which I think is a really good thing.
Australia is a world first, though, right? We did it first. Tell me about that, because that's exciting and unexpected.
Yes. There are special access programs in other countries, so you can access the substances through these special access programs. But my understanding, and I'm not a complete expert in the area, but my understanding is that Australia was, if not the first, then one of the first countries to actually reschedule it as a medicine.
So we were talking about an explanation of what is psilocybin and what is MDMA in the medicinal. So as a drug, what are they? What do they do?
Okay, yes. So, I mean, a pharmacologist would give you a better answer than I would here. But as you say, psilocybin is the kind of active component in what normally gets called magic mushrooms. In most of the research at the moment, it is actually a derived like pure psilocybin rather than the mushroom itself. And psilocybin falls into the classic hallucinogen category of compounds. So it acts specifically on the serotonin 2A receptor in your brain. And that's where I start kind of veering off what I actually can speak properly to. And okay, so
but I think the nuance that I guess I want to get to is that we're not talking about your friend getting you some magic mushrooms. We're talking about controlled doses, consistency in terms of how it's manufactured or derived, where it's from, purity, and exact dosing, correct?
Yes, all of those things, and having the dosing couched in prep therapy on the way in and integration on the way out, and good screening at the very beginning to make sure that the people who are actually getting into the treatment are willing and able to engage with it. I think all of that is really important as well.
So, yes, I understand. And we're going to talk about the protocol in detail because I think that's key. And then let's talk about ecstasy. What is ecstasy or MDMA rather, in the context of therapeutic treatment, MDMA?
Yep. Well, MDMA is not a classic hallucinogen. It's an amphetamine. So it works in the brain slightly differently, and experientially, my understanding is that it's a bit different as well. It's a shorter duration, and it's a bit less immersive than psilocybin is. So often those sessions look a little bit more like normal therapy. There's more talking and things like that, whereas the psilocybin experience is really, as much as possible, you're encouraging the client to go inside and move towards this experience that's kind of unfolding within them.
The research that I was familiar with the for psilocybin was end of life treatment therapy, which I thought was so fascinating and actually quite beautiful. So it was a research out of St. Vincent's Hospital in Melbourne
Yep.
that I was aware of. So this is before the legalization of psilocybin treatment.
Yep.
And they were working with end-of-life patients in palliative care to help them make peace, for lack of a better word, and have some closure with their impending death. And so the therapists who were working with these patients using psilocybin were taking them on the journey. And we'll talk about the protocol later, but the patients, the upshot was that, after they had this end of life psilocybin journey, the patients that had this experience had come to a really peaceful, complete state about what was going to happen. And they had, I guess, in a way, reconciled a lot of their anxiety, trauma, wishes for what was going to come ahead of them. And I thought that was so wonderful because we're not dismissing a single second of a human's life. We're saying right to the end, you're precious, that right to the end, you should be cared for. Your mental health matters, your comfort, your peace of mind matters. And I found that really touching. And I think that made me really interested in this field.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say really interested, in full disclosure, I've experienced psilocybin therapy illegally, but in a therapeutic, not as a recreational drug. So I tried the therapy for trauma, and it was in a controlled environment, certainly not as controlled as the protocols dictate. And I have to say, I wish that it had been, because I think it was so powerful. I actually think my treatment could have been even more enhanced. But so I had a pre-session consultation. Then I had the therapy, which lasts about 8 hours. It's about 6 hours when you're kind of on the psilocybin, and then another 2 hours kind of to taper off. And then I had post-treatment integration, which was kind of talk therapy and integration to make sense of it.
Yep.
And it was profound. It was a one and done, I always say, literally that the topic that came up in that session, I've never had to revisit. And prior to that, it was years of really struggling with it. So to have it now with, as you were saying, it takes two therapists to be in the room, a psychiatrist and a psychologist. You have so much pre-work. Your journey itself is so controlled and carefully curated. And then the integration process itself is so beautifully managed. I can only imagine how profound the changes can be for patients who are lucky enough to have access to this therapy.
Yeah, well, and the numbers coming out of the research at the moment are all very, very promising. And like you, hearing the stories of people that have gone through this and had such profound experiences and big changes in their lives, that's part of what keeps me, really interested in the area.
Can you tell me about music and psilocybin journey? I think that part of it is really fascinating, and I guess it talks to the protocol. So perhaps you could start with the protocol, the legal protocol, and certainly the protocol that you work with at GoodMind, um, and then how music plays into that.
Yep. Well, I guess it's important to say that there's not just one protocol. Different research teams do things differently,
Okay.
and different businesses will do things differently as the private sector kind of gets on board. But there are a few kind of key components. The first of which would be screening. So you would want to make sure that someone is able to engage with the therapy. And there's a number of things that would kind of screen you out if you've got like a bad heart condition, or your health is not good generally, a family history of schizophrenia. There's a kind of a bunch of things that would screen you out. And then once you've gotten past that point, the preparation process begins, where you, as a client, you would sit down with the therapists and you would talk about what's coming, what the experience might be like, what you can expect. Getting people, like, sometimes you feel a bit nauseous on psilocybin, so getting people ready for the kind of physical stuff that might be going on the day, and at the same time getting them ready for what the experience might be like, and helping them to become comfortable with that experience, and really encouraging them just to be open and trusting of the experience as it unfolds on the day. And alongside that, you would learn some grounding techniques, maybe some breathing techniques, or kind of grounding down through your body, to help if things are getting a bit scary or they're getting a bit challenging. Having ways of settling back into the experience from a settled state is important in preparation as well.
I would
And talking,
definitely advocate for that because it it's an experience, as you said, and it's not talk therapy. It is an experience, and it's an experience that's going on in your mind, and it doesn't have a natural lever. You can't really make it stop. Once you're on the psilocybin, you are on the journey,
yeah,
and so I would say that particular aspect of it is having really experienced people in the room with you to support that journey and to help you pass, the S bends of a 6 hour journey is so fundamental. And because you really don't have the skill set to do it, you don't have the experience, you don't have the skill set. So I think that's a really interesting aspect of it. And in my head, when after I had my psilocybin experience, I kept on thinking, what would my dad do if he was on this treatment protocol? Like, and the reason I thought about my dad is that he's had fibromyalgia, he's had PTSD, and I've
sure.
always thought, God, I would love for him to have this treatment. And I always think, oh, what would dad do in the hallucinating phase? What would dad do when, like, you're really in it? And I think that, you do need, and you do need someone in the room with you who knows what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's really important. And talking ahead of time about anything that you might be scared of, what you don't want to come up, and what we might be able to do if it does come up, in order for you to be able to be with it in a way that it's not going to be overwhelming or freak you out. So I think that's really fundamental in the prep phase.
Can I ask you something with regards to that prep phase, and also steering the direction of the experience? Um, when again, I will go back to my experience, and mine wasn't in the same protocols that we're discussing, loosely around the same protocols, but definitely not as detailed. Um, whatever came up, came up. So I wasn't in control of what experience and what particular issue uh, we were addressing. And
Mm.
so there were definitely moments of overwhelm, like because you're really going into the depths, I would say the depths of your soul at some points of the experience.
Yeah.
But are you saying to me that, with this, the prep work and the framework that you can do therapeutic assisted psychedelic experiences, you can actually set a very clear framework as to what is being treated on the day of treatment?
No, I'm not saying that.
Okay.
Just getting the person as ready as possible for whatever might come up on the day.
And so
But
when you say might come up, does that mean that um, the psychotherapist and the psychiatrist who are in the room uh, are ready to deal with anything that comes up and to support the patient on that aspect of the journey, even if it hasn't come up before in talk therapy or during their treatment uh, years of treatment?
as much as possible, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. So to be ready and available to steer them. So sorry, I interrupted you. So you take the medicine, you enter into the state. The therapist on hand to help guide and make you comfortable for the journey. You have some prep so you can understand what the physical experience might be, what the emotional experience might be, what the mental experience might be. Um, and then could you talk us through how the drug is administered and then how it starts to work?
Yeah. So on dosing day, you would all show up at the room and have a bit of a chat at the beginning, and maybe just remember the grounding techniques that you talked about, or some of those helpful things. And then when the person is ready, the psilocybin comes in a little capsule, so they would swallow that with some water, and for half hour, 45 minutes to an hour after that, they should be starting to feel the effects of the substance. And going back to the music, so when they ingest, you would start playing the music playlist, which is designed to mirror the intensity of the drug experience. So it's sort of supportive and grounding in the beginning, and then as the drug effect comes on, it sort of the music intensifies at the same time to try and help you open up into this expanded state. And then you would be at the peak of the experience for an hour, a couple of hours, and then kind of gently tapering off until, as you say, about the 6 hour mark, when normally people are kind of landed back on Earth.
And can you tell me, in a therapeutic sense, are you lying down? Are you so the experience that I had an eye mask on, I was lying down, I was kind of cocooned.
Yep. So the one of the kind of key principles of psychedelic assisted therapy is that the set and setting are really important. So the setting is what we're talking about now. So making sure that the room is like a nice, comfy environment, a comforting environment, more like somebody's lounge room than a hospital room. And yeah, as you say, the client's usually lying down on a bed. They've got eye shades and headphones to listen to the music. The music's often usually also coming through a speaker so that the therapists can hear the music along with the client. And yeah, plenty of cushions and rugs and stuff to make you
And plenty
comfortable.
of tissues. My goodness, did I cry? I
Yeah,
have never wept like I did. I laughed. I also laughed a lot. I laughed. I cried. The depths of emotion was really intense, really intense.
yeah, and I think that that's a good point. That it's it can be a big and challenging experience, but people also have these mystical experience where they they can experience, big connection with the world and everyone around them. They can feel love. There's all kinds of experiences on the positive end of the
Definitely.
spectrum, which I think are really very therapeutic as well.
And also unexpected, I would say that I certainly I got some aha insights from the experience that really formed the basis of new um, pathways for me, like a new way of observing things and approaching things. And I would never have accessed that alternative viewpoint had I not been in that, state. So for me, it was definitely I had that somatic release. It was very physical, very, very emotional, but I
Yep.
also got some great cerebral kind of downloads, I like to call them, but they stayed with me and they changed the way I approach things for the better in my experience.
Yeah, I'm glad you had that outcome. That's really positive. And
Can
I think, as you say, um, I like how you're discussing the different kind of aspects of it, because it can be a very embodied somatic process where you're feeling things, in your guts and in your body, and often that doesn't make an awful lot of sense in the experience, but that's where the integration sessions come in. You can kind of put some of that back together, or maybe it is a non-verbal process in itself. It's just actually feeling that safety or that welcome or that love in your body is the thing that then allows you to change moving forward.
want to stay on the music for a little bit longer because
Sure.
I find this just actually the most fascinating aspect of the assisted therapy. Um, how do you select the music list? And is it in consultation with the patient, or is there a prescribed best practice playlist?
There are a few playlists out there, and it's a kind of nascent field at the moment. That's sort of part of what I'm really interested in, is figuring out, like, how do we do this as well as we can. And that's, I think my skill set as a musician and as a therapist really come together well there. The music is chosen so that a lot of the research talks about the music being both a supporter of the experience and a catalyst for the experience. Or some of the client reports that I've read talk about it as the music being a guide or a co journey on this unfolding experience. So people in that state listen to music in a completely different way. It's
Oh,
not
for
it's not about
sure.
yeah, it's not about liking or disliking. It's more like, can I be open to what the music is bringing to me right now in this experience? And I think that that's a really fundamental thing.
I had
Um,
live music. I had drumming as part and singing as
all
part
right.
of my experience. And I will say that, yes, it wasn't about liking it or not liking it, but sometimes during the experience where I didn't love the music, it would kind of, it wasn't as seamless as you're describing it, because I think you're describing it as a kind of a co pilot in the experience. Whereas, so I'm interested in that curation element, because if say, for example, the music is really heavily drum and bass or classical, and you actually really don't like it, I think it would be kind of disruptive to the depth or the richness of your experience. Would I be
Yeah.
right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Mendel Kalin's one of the key researchers in the area. He's a British guy, and he found exactly that. That if you don't resonate with the music, or the music doesn't resonate with you, then it can get in the way. So, I mean, hopefully that's something that you'd be able to discuss in preparation, and there's kind of a nuance there between, I don't like this because it's pushing me into something that's challenging and I'm a bit
I
scared,
totally understand. Yeah.
versus, I just hate this music and I really don't want to experience it, which, a good therapist at that point would make a judgment call about, okay, maybe we'll make a change then and shift to another track or something. And I do think, eventually, hopefully we'll get to a point where you might have, 5, 6, 7 different playlists and be able to have a conversation with someone about like what their preferences are and match it to them a little bit. The challenges there is it's like 6 hours worth of music's a lot of music. So there's likely going to be something in there that you don't love.
So you're playing DJ, psychologist, therapist.
Yeah, I wear a lot of hats.
Absolutely. Speaking of the lot of hats, so can you explain to me the role of the 2 therapists that are in the treatment room with the patient?
Yep. I mean, there's sort of a lot of layers to that. The reason behind having a psychiatrist, the psychiatrist being in the room is partly because they're a medically trained professional. If something, medical goes wrong, they're there and they can handle that. They're also the prescriber of the medicine, so the regulations say that the prescriber really does need to be there for the duration, which I think makes sense. Whereas the psychologist, and depending upon the team, there could be psychotherapists involved or mental health nurses. They bring more of their therapeutic skills, and I think it really does come right down to like, who are the 2 individual humans in the room with you, and what skills do they bring, and how do they work together? I think all of that is really important, and I think that having a multidisciplinary approach to that is a really good idea, because we go through all this training and can get kind of siloed into one way of thinking, whereas if we've got lots of different people coming from lots of different perspectives, I think that makes the whole thing richer and more, complex, nuanced understanding of what's going on.
So we're talking about a long day with 2 expensive therapists in the room,
Yep.
right? So this
Yep.
is and it's not covered by Medicare at this point. Is that correct? This is a private therapy option.
Yes, that's right.
And can you give me a ballpark of what a private therapeutic treatment, because, you're talking about the pre-consultation, the actual day of dosing, and then the post-integration. What kind of investment is it? And then secondly, I'm going to ask you, how do you get on the program? Because it's not for everyone.
Yep. Well, the figures that get thrown around at the moment are anywhere from $15,000 to $25,000. So it is very expensive at the moment, which I think that there's a real ethical edge around there. I mean, we want this treatment to be available to people who need it, not just people who can afford it. And I think that ultimately funding this treatment is the answer to that in the long term. I can understand why governments would be needing to see more evidence before they're willing to kind of really put money behind it. But ultimately, I think that is where it will need to go. And to speak to the second part of your question, I would be encouraging people to get in touch with their treating physicians, their psychiatrist or their GP. And yeah, there's still the field is still very new, so it's all still developing. And I mean, as of right now, I don't know of any clinics that are actually open in Australia yet. So it's still on its way.
So going back to the beginning, psilocybin is used for treatment-resistant depression.
Correct.
And so what constitutes treatment resistance? So that if you are going to your treating physician, whether it's your GP or your psychiatrist who is prescribing medication to you, or you're under their treatment or of a therapist, how do you then say, okay, can we explore a new way of coming together on treating me and healing me?
I mean, from a definitions point of view, the kind of generally accepted definition is if someone has tried 2 treatments, be that an antidepressant or a course of therapy, or some combination thereof, and they're still experiencing the symptoms, then that would be then dubbed treatment-resistant depression.
The reason I became so interested in this whole area is, obviously my show is called Ageless, and I'm interested in longevity, cellular wellness, and all the research and every single piece of science that is related to aging and living well comes down to the reduction of stress and managing the human response to stress, the hormones that are compromised or overactive in the face of chronic stress and anxiety. And so to hear about a therapy or a modality that can help reduce the most aging of scenarios, which is chronic stress, chronic anxiety, seems like a great ally in your quest for longevity and wellness. And I guess my question to you then is, how good is psychedelic assisted therapy in the treatment of chronic anxiety, chronic stress?
Well, that's something that we're still finding out. I mean, the reason that the two substances have been made legal for the two indications is because that's where the research is. So I'm anticipating there's a whole bunch more research getting done at the moment into different indications. And as that research comes on board, I expect that what is available in terms of psychedelic assisted psychotherapy will get broader. But there needs to be that kind of backing of research before we can treat it more broadly.
So can we talk about MDMA now and the protocols for PTSD and the use of MDMA for that particular condition?
Yep, it's slightly less of my area. I kind of know a little more about psilocybin, but yep, what would you like to know?
So I guess I would like to know is, why are they using MDMA and not psilocybin for PTSD? Why not a psychedelic? Or is MDMA a psychedelic? I thought that when we were doing definitions, it wasn't really a psychedelic.
Not technically,
yes.
But you still can have a psychedelic experience on MDMA. In terms of the nitty gritty of why MDMA for PTSD, I'm not exactly sure. I have read that there seems to be ways in which, when you're on MDMA, when you're under the effects of MDMA, you can kind of be open to witnessing your trauma in a way that doesn't activate you quite so much, and that witnessing can be very helpful in terms of working towards resolving the trauma. But yeah, that's kind of what I've read.
Can I ask you, how do you envision the integration of psychedelic assisted therapy in, normal medicine? It's one thing to legalize two medicines for the use of two very, very specific mental health issues, but it's another thing for it to become adopted as, a mainstream or a well-funded or a well-accepted treatment protocol.
Yeah, well, I think that's kind of the road that lays ahead. I think that at the moment, getting good clinicians, people with good skill sets for the work, is really important. Providing good training to clinicians so that they're skilled up and able to do this kind of work, because as we've discussed, it is quite different to treatment as usual at the moment. And as the body of research grows and there's more kind of real world experience, people who are getting this treatment in the community, then hopefully we'll be able to make more decisions about how this fits with the rest of treatment at large.
We were talking, we touched briefly on it. So if you're okay with it, I'd like to go back to the integration phase of the
Yeah,
psilocybin
yeah,
treatment.
that's a good idea. Yeah,
Um, and something you raised earlier, which I think is really interesting, is that uh, psilocybin treatment was really gaining traction for treatment resistant depression in veterans. And so I'm curious as to so post treatment. So we talked a little bit about prep for the treatment, the actual
yeah.
dose day. What happens in the integration phase? How many sessions are typical or desirable, and and why is this part of the therapy so key in the success of this therapy?
Yeah, I think that it really is key, because these experiences can be really big experiences and they can be challenging to make sense of. And to, I think another key part of the work with integration is helping someone to take this big experience that they've had, this new way of looking at themselves or the world, and be able to actually embed that in their everyday life so that it's not just some crazy thing that happened one day. It becomes an experience where it was like, oh, well, actually, from then I could be more open to my family, or I could let go of that thing that I'd been holding on to for so long, or I could, change the way that I go about living in the world in a meaningful way. So the work of integration would be getting together with the therapists and talking about what happened, talking through any bits that were challenging, and you can even use a bit of music in the integration phase as well, like going actually kind of dipping your toe back in the water of that experience if you can find where in the playlist it was. Um,
Wow.
yeah, yeah. So I think that's pretty cool. Um,
So in terms of that I mean that's fascinating. That would that be the two therapists who are witnessing the treatment journey would be making notes and observing and for the post integration phase
yeah,
when the patient was most responsive or most emotive or most triggered
yeah,
during, and then noting how it corresponds with the music or the
yeah.
timestamp, I guess, of the treatment.
Yeah, what was playing at those key points in time. And in addition to talking about the challenging stuff, talking about all the really great stuff. What was, these big expanded states that you might get into? What was that like? How did you feel in your bones about that? What does that change? What does that change about you? What does it change about the world? And just being able to provide someone a forum to kind of make sense and embody and really bed down this experience that they've had. In terms of how long, typically 3 to 5 sessions, but it would really depend on the individual person. If someone really wasn't kind of making, if someone was still sitting with the discomfort of it all, I think it would be important to keep going until you found some place of resolution.
So when you say keep going, would you go back to having psilocybin, another psilocybin dosing day, or is one enough and you would spend more time in the integration phase?
I was kind of talking more about spending more time in the integration phase.
Got it.
But depending upon the protocol, there might be another dosing day. There's sort of different thoughts about how to go about that.
So at GoodMind, it's a private practice. Are you seeing, a good response from psychologists and psychiatrists in terms of partnering with you to provide psychedelic assisted therapy to their treatment resistant patients? Is this, since the July legislation, has have you been ready for and have you been surprised by the uptake?
Yeah, we've definitely got lots of interest, and and we're taking inquiries at the moment. We're not set up to start treatment yet, but we're getting there. We're excited about getting going as soon as we can. But yeah, there's definitely been plenty of interest in the area.
And going back to the idea of, the origins of psychedelic assisted therapies, I know that from what I've read is ketamine is another big drug that's used in the US, and in some states it has been legalized for the treatment of treatment-resistant depression, PTSD, and trauma-related experiences. Is that something that's on the agenda in Australia? Is ketamine being worked through at this point?
Yes, there are a couple of clinics offering ketamine assisted therapy out there.
It's
It's a
legal
slightly
here?
yes, yeah. It's similar to psychedelic assisted therapy. It's quite tightly controlled, but it is available.
Fantastic. And is there anything that I mean, we touched on this before, the affordability at the moment is really a barrier to entry. What happens now? So we've had the legalization, which is, took years and so much research, global research and partnership with a lot of studies. But what happens now to bring it forward into? I don't know how drugs get put onto a national, prescription. I'm really curious, and I'm sure our readers are, how do we go down from $25,000 a treatment to something that, could be afforded by someone who desperately needs it?
Yeah, it is a very labor intensive form of treatment. It's a very intensive form of treatment. Having two therapists in the room for every client. That's where a lot of the expense is coming from. So really, the only way I can see that becoming affordable for people is if it's subsidized in some way, be that through Medicare or through the health funds deciding that that's something that they want to support. That's the way forward, I think.
And of course, there'd be a limit on how many people are trained in this. And so, scarcity of trained professionals, both on the psychiatric side and on the psychology side. Where do you learn this? I'm curious, where did you learn this? And where do the practicing psychiatrists that you partner with, where did they learn this?
Well, there's some training available here. There's some training available overseas. I'm part of a clinical trial as well, and we received some training through that. So there is some out there at the moment, but I do think that there needs to be more because, as you say, there is a real kind of chicken and egg problem at the moment where there's lots of people interested in it being clients, and we're kind of scrambling to catch up and have enough clinicians to meet that demand.
Scott, to round things up, I want to touch on something that I'm always asked about, and that is the ethical considerations of psychedelic assisted therapy. What do you think are the, or rather, what are the questions you get asked when it comes to the subject of ethics and this particular form of treatment?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big, gnarly question. I think the affordability thing is a real ethical issue. Because as I say, we want it to be available for people who need it rather than just people who can afford it. I think that the other kind of big ethical area is the fact that when someone is under the influence of one of these substances, they're very vulnerable. And it's very important to make sure that the clinicians who are there are well trained and able to deal with whatever comes up. And that there's good regulations around what's allowed and not allowed, and that comes back to the preparation question as well, making sure that someone's prepared for all of the things that might come up. So I think that's that's an important area as well.
And I guess the other question is, the source of the drug. Um, you know, who has it, who gets it, where do you get it from? That would also feed into the conversation around ethics as well, right?
Well, yes, I mean, there's all kinds of regulations about the supply of the substances and where they're housed, and yeah, that's a whole thing.
Well, you've certainly taken on a massive new frontier, and I guess it's incredible, and every new treatment and every new protocol has a genesis and a start. So I think it would be fascinating to have this conversation with you in a couple of years' time, where this treatment and has entered, the next phase. So beyond becoming legalized, for you to have some, a body of treatment experiences, and success, hopefully success stories to talk about as well. I think it's such an exciting time in this aspect of
Yeah,
therapy.
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm deeply grateful for your insights, and it's exciting that Australia has taken this pioneering approach to psychedelic assisted therapy.
Yeah, thanks, Bar. It's good to chat.
Thank